You heard anything from Mary and Jerry?
No, they're busy. Can't be. First came out red all over like a hairy garment, and they called his name Esau because he's
Not what we wanted.
already said that part, yes.
Yeah, that was last week.
There's entirely too much to cover in this lesson to do it any justice. Did y'all read the text that went with everything? You didn't know the chapters? Well, that's the man I get to preach today. Oh, I had a drippy nose the last couple of days. Leslie got up, I guess he got up Tuesday with a runny nose. And I didn't have a runny nose till he got up and started having a runny nose. And then my nose started running. It's been running ever since.
I can tell you every time the pollen is bad, because the top of that pond is just coated with green. And this morning it's coated with green, so the pollen must be really thick.
Yeah, well, the car's coated with green too. I asked Leslie to wash it for me, and he said he took it, but they just put gas in it. All right, where do we want to start this thing? We have to get over to...
Gerald, it's so nice to see you back home.
Thank you.
Well, that's what I told him.
Yes.
I told him I missed him. I got stuck yesterday with my studies because as I read through this whole thing to get the story, there's about 50 or 60 years that I can't account for. Because when you get the ages of, I don't know, I tried to
Right,
go.
chapter 38, what are you looking at?
No, I started off looking at, I'm not, there he is. Now he can start.
How you doing?
Well, how about yourself? Okay.
We told him he can't go back anywhere else that he's gone. He has to come back. This is 2 weeks in a row he's been here, so he has to come back. It makes you a member back here, you know.
That's right.
Okay.
Remember?
Well, I know, but he's actually transferred away. But see, now he's come 2 weeks in a row, so that makes him a member here. Okay, what? Do what?
Visitor next time.
That's right.
Okay, I was looking at the ages. So I was in chapter 25, and it says Isaac was 40 years old when he took Rebekah to wife. Then it says in verse 26 that he was threescore years old when she had her children. So 40 to threescore. What? Eva? What's a score?
Do what now?
What's a score? How much is a score?
A score is what? Like a decade?
20.
20.
Yeah.
Well,
So
decade.
a decade's 10. So it's 2 decades.
Oh, 2 decades.
Okay, so
What are
three
you
score, I'm looking at Genesis 25,
Okay.
verse 26, and it says, and Isaac was threescore years old when she had her children. So that's 20 more years past 40, makes him 60 years old. Okay, so then,
25, 26.
chapter 25, verse 26.
Verse 26 says, and after that came his brother out.
And the last of it says, Isaac was threescore years old when she bare them.
Oh, okay, I didn't read far enough. Okay, there we go.
Okay, so then you go to threescore is 60. Score is 20.
Yeah.
So threescore is 60. So he was 60 years old when he had his sons. And then,
Jacob and Esau, yeah.
yeah. And then you get way on over here to chapter 35 and verse 38. 28, not 38. Chapter 35, verse 28, and it says, and the days of Isaac were 180 years. So he lived 180 years. So he was 60 years old when the kids were born. So he lived 120 more years after his sons were born, right?
Right.
Okay. So in the intervening chapters, you have the boys growing up, Isaac and Esau and Jacob with their problem, deception. Jacob has to run. He says that he tells Laban that he has been in his service for 20 years, and then he goes home. So you got, if you give the son, Jacob and Esau, say they're 30 years old by the time they have their quarrel. So 60 and 30 is 90. So Isaac would have been 90 years old when the quarrel happened. Well, that means he's going to live 90 more years, right?
Mhm.
Okay. So he's got 90 more years to live after Jacob takes off. Jacob is only gone 20 years. So when he comes back,
Daddy's 110.
then he's 110, but he's got 70 more years to live, right?
Mhm.
Okay. So 70 more years to live means that all of Jacob's children are going to be like 40, 50 years old, right? Because the oldest one, Reuben, when they came back from Haran, Reuben would have been 22 maybe by the time you get all the other kids born. If he's the firstborn, they have 12, and you got to have spaces between each one of them. Couple of years, you know. Of course, you got the two concubines get involved too. So, but still, I tracked it out. I wrote it out. So, Reuben would have been 22 to 24 years old by the time they headed back home. So, there's just, you can't account for the time frame. It means that if they got back home after 20 years, it means that then Jacob was what? Isaac was 110 years old.
So he had another 70 years to live.
Had another 70 years to live. So how old were these brothers? I mean, when you read the story of Joseph, he's about 17 when he gets sold.
Yeah.
So that means that Isaac is still alive. You don't hear about Isaac anymore, but he has to still be alive. If he lived 180 years, he has to still be alive when Joseph was sold into slavery, right? They don't know where he went. He just disappears, just like his father didn't know where he went and grieved his death. So if you get on past that, because Joseph was probably 40, about 40, by the time the family came to Egypt to hunt for grain. So they were 40 years old. So that still gives you Isaac being alive. He must have died just before they went to Egypt.
Yeah.
But when you get to this verse that says he lived 180 years old, then you don't hear anything else about him. It's like, you know. So there's,
Didn't do anything.
well, yeah, but there's like 50 or 60 years in there that Isaac is alive, and they don't say another word about him.
Well, the rest of the family comes prominent in the story of,
Oh, it seems like the patriarch ought to get a mention somewhere besides he died.
well, yeah, I guess. I don't know.
And to put it that early in the story,
He'd
you
done
know?
his job with Jacob and Esau, I guess.
Another 70 years and died.
I guess. So anyway, that was my dilemma yesterday, and if y'all can come up with an answer on that, I'll take it, whatever you want to say. Okay, so let's get back over here. We're going to tell a story for today. That would be Esau and Jacob. And as I was reading through this, a curious verse in chapter 27, verse 41, Genesis 27, verse 41, says, And Esau hated Jacob because of the blessing wherewith his father blessed him. And Esau said in his heart, The days of mourning for my father are at hand. Then I will slay my brother Jacob. Well, this is at the time that Jacob is leaving. You got, if you say that Isaac is 90 years old here, he's got 90 more years that he doesn't die. And he was fairly feeble, he couldn't see, he was blind at the time Jacob stole the blessing, right?
Yeah.
And he's got 90 more years to live. Maybe that's why they don't mention him. He's a feeble old man, he just sits in a tent.
Could it be for 90 years?
Well, if Esau says the days of my, the
Well,
days,
there are this morning, or
the days of my mourning for my father's coming soon. He's got 90 more years that he lives.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, you'd think, yeah.
No wonder he's not mentioned. He's unable to do much.
That'd be worse than being in a nursing home.
Or do much.
I guess.
With a feeding
But
tube
I
or
mean,
something,
when I
yeah.
picked up all these little bits and pieces, I thought, I don't know about this story.
Ask him when we get there, what did he do?
Yeah, well,
This really worked.
Moses, why'd you leave all that out? Okay, so we will start here in chapter 28. So chapter 28, Isaac calls Jacob and blesses him and charged him and said unto him, Thou shalt not take a wife of the daughters of Canaan, because Esau had already taken two. And so he said, don't do this. So he tells him to go to Padan Aram, to Bethuel, thy mother's father, and take thee a wife from thence, from the daughters of Laban, thy mother's brother. So Laban is his uncle, and he's sent to this family.
Where you at?
Chapter 28.
Genesis 28.
I'm on 32 over here.
Yeah, I was over there. And I came back.
Okay.
All right. So anyway, we won't, because we don't have much time, we won't read all this genealogy stuff. So he gets up there, and he gets blessed by his father. And Jacob, chapter 29, so chapter 28, now we go to chapter 29. Jacob went on his journey and came to the land of the people of the east. And he looked, and behold, a well in the field, and lo, there were... No, let's read. I need to read about the blessing from God at Bethel. There's too much to cover. All right. Chapter 28, verse 10. And Jacob went out from Beersheba and went toward Haran. And he lighted upon a certain place and tarried there all night, because the sun was set. And he took of the stones of that place and put them up for pillows. Can you imagine sleeping with a rock for your pillow? If I don't have nice goose down feathers under my head, I can't sleep. So he went down and went to sleep. And he dreamed, and behold, a ladder set up on the earth, and the top of it reached to heaven, and behold, the angels of God ascending and descending on it. And behold, the Lord stood above it, and said, I am the Lord God of Abraham thy father, and the God of Isaac. The land whereon thou liest, to thee will I give it, and to thy seed. And thy seed shall be as the dust of the earth, and thou shalt spread abroad to the west, and to the east, and to the north, and the south. And in thee shall all the seed and all the families of the earth be blessed. This is exactly the same covenant that he gave to Abraham in chapter 12.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Let's read it. Keep your finger here. Go back to chapter 12. Chapter 12, verse 2 and 3. Okay. This is God talking to Abraham, and he said, I will make of thee a great nation, and I will bless thee, and make thy name great. Thou shalt be a blessing, and I will bless them that bless thee, and curse them that curse thee. And in thee shall all the families of the earth be blessed. What he told Jacob was, and thy seed shall be as the dust of the earth, and thou shalt spread abroad to the east, the west, the north, the south. And in thee shall thy seed and all the families of the earth be blessed. Same thing. So he's not giving Jacob a new covenant, he's giving him the same covenant.
Mm-hmm.
Verse 15 and 28. And behold, I am with thee, and will keep thee in all the places whither thou goest, and I will bring thee again into this land, for I will not leave thee until I have done that which I have spoken of thee. So, this verse 15 is the verse that Jacob really needed to remember. Because as he spent the next 20 years, he kept getting himself in trouble.
Mm-hmm.
So he forgot what God said, I will not leave you. And I think that we get in the same situation. We get in situations where we feel that God has left us, and he's not there when we need him to lift us up and to provide for us and whatnot.
Okay, so that's a question. We were talking in the car coming in.
You were talking to my husband on the way in.
Yes, I was talking to your husband. He was driving Mrs. Daisy this
That's
morning.
right. But anyway, the question came, what about when you get in a mess? I mean, like he was here, he was in a mess, and you do stuff in your life. Do your angels leave you?
No.
Even you're in a bad place. and
Well,
there's
they will
nothing
not go in a bar with you.
gambling
They'll
and-
stand outside the door and wait for you to come back out.
Well, I've heard that.
That's
Ellen
what I
White says that there's places they won't go.
Yeah, that's what I wonder. You know, that kind of thinking that, you know, you put yourself out there in a spot sometimes where God says, well, I made a reference to Romans 1, where God gives them up to their vile affections and says, okay, that's where you are. You know, there's nothing I can do for you over there.
Yeah. I mean, there are places that angels fear to tread, just because they're just not going to go there.
Yeah. Well, that's in a different context.
It is?
Yeah. And I'm not sure it's Bible.
No, it isn't. It's a, what is that?
Men rush in where angels fear to tread something, yeah.
It's a song,
Is it?
yeah.
I,
I don't know.
can't tell you which one, but I know it's a song.
But when you're in a bad place, your angel stops at the door, doesn't it? That's what I thought.
yeah, they're not going to tread in there with you. If,
I always felt they go with you, but they say nothing, they are just in.
well, they may, but I mean, if you choose to get into a place like that, if you accidentally end up someplace like that, they'll go in to defend you.
That's a different story.
Yes.
But if by choice
If
you
by
go,
choice you go there.
and do stuff, and you're absolutely rebellious. You know, you may have in your head the thought that, well, like Eva was mentioning, you know, because she's had education, you know, from a kid, you know, when you do bad stuff, you know, and there's a God that's watching over you, that kind of stuff. But at the same time, when you go into some of these places, you make that choice, and you say, God, I don't want you with me right now. I'm going to go over here. You know, there may still be the lingering thought in your head, you know, there are certain lines I'm not going to cross, but
I still, you know, when you're in a place like that, like me and Tony, we go to bars and they was gambling, maybe girls dance, you know. But anyhow, but what I'm saying, they was filth.
Yeah.
It was just filthy to be there. I mean,
Angels don't want to be
gambling,
around that kind of stuff.
But God is not going to let his angel go in there. I knew in my mind, I thought, Lord, this is so wrong. This is so
yeah.
Well, there are some other statements of Ellen White's that say that if you're in a house where there's argument carrying on, you drive the angels away.
Well, yeah,
So if you're fussing and fighting all the time, you drive the angels out of that home. They don't want to listen to it.
yeah.
So if they won't be in a home where fussing and fighting's going on, how can you say that they're going to be in a place of wickedness?
We make the choice.
Yeah, we make the choice. Okay, that gets me back to Jacob then. And God saying, I'll never leave you. Jacob's heart wasn't necessarily one of rebellion.
Oh, he just ended up doing things that weren't necessarily kosher and got himself in trouble.
Yeah, got himself in trouble. Well, like having those extra wives and stuff too. You know, with Leah and Rachel and,
Well, he didn't want Leah.
well, he only wanted Leah, or Rachel. Yeah, he didn't want
He only
Leah,
wanted
yeah.
Rachel. He didn't want Leah. Leah was forced on him.
But even that, it was the trickery of his uncle that got him involved in that. You know, it wasn't God saying, okay, you've made that choice, you got the wrong woman.
It was the trickery of his uncle that made him do some of the things that he did with the livestock, too,
Yeah,
because Laban never paid him.
yeah.
So when he said, I'm going home after 20 years, I'm going home with something.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why, you know, as the story is written in Scripture, it says that he went to Laban and said, you haven't paid me. I've been here working for you for 14 years, and you have not paid me a penny, except I got these two women. Well, okay, fine. Now I want to start earning some things so I can go home with some wealth. Well, Laban didn't want him to leave because he was a good herdman. He prospered.
Yeah.
Laban recognized that he prospered under Jacob's care because God was with Jacob, because Laban was a crook. All the way around, Laban was a crook. So Laban didn't want him to leave. You know, if he leaves, my own sons and servants can't do the job that he's done while he's here for 14 years. My wealth is increased. So Jacob says, okay, all right, well, you don't like these ring-straked and spotted sheep and goats. Okay, I'll just take those, and you could have all the white ones.
Yeah.
So Laban says, okay, fine. Now, it tells in the story that Jacob had figured out that whenever the animals ate in front of these willow things that were stuck in the ground, they conceived spotted up offspring.
Yeah.
But that didn't have anything to do with it.
You know, it's round.
What he was recognizing was, if this sheep goes with that sheep, I get spotted and ring-streaked. He's seeing genetics at work here before they understood anything about genetics. If this spotted animal gets with a white animal, I get spotted offspring.
Mm-hmm.
So that's all he did. He said, okay, we just put these together, and then I end up with all the spotted offspring. Because the spotted offspring was that the spotting part was dominant over the white coats. That's another thing. That means that he wasn't there, because he said that when he'd been there 20 years. So he had to have stayed long enough to get at least 2 or 3 more breedings. So, sheep and goats twice a year, max, right? You're a sheep and goat person. So you're only going to get 2 repeats in a year.
They can do that for a little while, but then they have to rest.
Yeah, so he was at least a year more after the 20 years, maybe 2 years before he actually left.
In order to develop a herd.
Yeah, in order to walk out with a herd. I mean, it says that he cleaned out all the ring-streaked and spotted to begin with, but then he had to have been there at least a year to get 2 more breedings out of those animals, and probably more than that. And then he had a flock that he left with, a large flock that he left with. Go ahead.
Okay, he got Leah and Rachel.
Yeah. He got Leah by...
He had 2 women, but
he-
God,
He got Leah by trickery,
yeah.
because that
He
Laban
thought it was
forced her.
Rachel he was working for 7 years for,
Right. Well, he did work for 7 years for her.
and then he worked another 7 years.
Well, yeah, but he had to pay for Leah first,
Right,
because he agreed to pay for Rachel.
right.
But then it was Leah that got stuck in the tent with him. Okay? So he ended up with Leah. When he gets up in the next morning, he's going, wait a minute, this isn't the right woman. He got me too drunk last night. And he did. Laban got him drunk and put him in the tent with the wrong woman. Because he knew that once he'd been with the wrong woman, he was married to her.
Mm-hmm.
So, back in the day, but it seems like in the eyes of God, that would be wrong to have 2 women.
Well, it was. God never,
But God still,
He still blessed him, yeah.
yes.
he still blessed him. Because God knew that he'd been tricked. God knew that he loved Rachel. God knew that. Laban knew that. His uncle knew that.
Yeah.
But he had to get rid of, it says that Leah had weak eyes. And she wasn't very pretty. So she's the older sister, and she's not very pretty, and he can't get rid of her. So that's why he figures, okay, he thinks he wants Rachel. Fine. I'll get rid of both of them at one time, but he's going to take Leah first. So that's why he said in the story, well, it's not our way of doing things to get rid of the younger daughter before the older daughter, because he was going to be stuck with Leah forever if he didn't get her married off. Nobody wanted her. Not that she probably wasn't a nice person, but she wasn't as pretty as Rachel.
I think it's interesting, too. I mean, verse 20. This is chapter 29, verse 20. Jacob served 7 years for Rachel. And we've been singing some songs this morning, take up your cross and follow me, that kind of stuff. And verse 20, Jacob served 7 years for Rachel, and they seemed unto him but a few days. And we often think that in this life, our lives are just, it's horrible, the living a Christian life is, such a burden. And we got the wrong attitude about Christ and about Christian service, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah.
He served 7 years, but it seemed like just a few days to it.
That's how much he loved her.
Yeah.
Well, that's what it says, yeah, for the love he had for her. It seemed like just a few days because he loved her so much.
So our attitude towards Christ is my point, and toward Christianity in general, in life, Christian living, we've got a whole, our thoughts are all confused. We just get mixed up.
Every day.
Yeah.
Okay, so God gives this blessing, and he sees this ladder. What's the ladder signify? Angels ascending and descending upon it.
Chapter 28.
Well, keep your finger there and go to John chapter 1. And the end of the chapter there, you see the Nathan being called as a disciple. Philip goes and gets him and brings him. And Nathan says,
What verse did you say?
51.
well, yeah, but let's start reading with 45. Philip findeth Nathanael and saith unto him, I have found him of whom Moses in the law and the prophets did write, Jesus of Nazareth, the son of Joseph. And Nathanael said unto him, Can there be any good thing come out of Nazareth? And Philip said unto him, Come and see. You just don't take my word for it. Jesus saw Nathanael coming to him, and he said, Behold, an Israelite indeed, in whom is no guile. And Nathanael said unto him, How do you know me? And Jesus answered and said, Before Philip called you, I saw you sitting under the fig tree. And Nathanael answered and said unto him, Rabbi, thou art the Son of God. Thou art the King of Israel. And Jesus answered and said unto him, Because I said unto thee, I saw thee under the fig tree, you believe me? You shall see greater things than these. And he said unto him, Verily, verily, I say unto you, hereafter ye shall see heaven open, and the angels of God ascending and descending upon the Son of Man. So that's a direct reference of Jesus back to where we just read about this ladder coming down from heaven. So if the ladder came down from heaven, did it come all the way to the ground?
Yes, well, it says it was set on the earth.
Then what's the significance of going from heaven to the earth and tying it into where Jesus said that he's that ladder? What's the point of the illustration here?
It's, it's God reaching down to us, in Christ, going all the way to us, not stopping even one round short of
Right.
coming to us.
So that tells us, this right here really is, I don't know what the word is, it's not an illustration, but
It's a statement of fact.
a statement of fact that Jesus is going to come in human nature.
Yeah.
And all the way to the ground means he takes fallen human nature.
Right, that's Hebrews 2. Hebrews 2 is a description of this, where he took upon himself likewise whatever, that whole list of things in verse 14.
Yeah, not the seed of Abraham,
Yeah.
not the seed of angels, but the seed of Abraham.
Right.
So this ladder is significant because it says that when Christ is the mediator, all the way from heaven all the way to the ground. He is the one that intercedes for us. I mean, from the very beginning, when Adam and Eve fell, he was the intercessor, immediately the intercessor. So if you understand that we need to understand, I guess I need to say, we need to understand that this statement here of the ladder tied with where Christ himself says that he is the ladder with angels descending and ascending upon him, that ties back to this verse, and Christ is making the definitive statement that he is that link between heaven and earth. And to be a complete link, he has to take fallen human nature. If he stopped a half a rung short, if his feet hovered here above the earth, then he didn't save me where I am down there.
Right.
He couldn't possibly do it.
Right.
Okay. So he goes on, and chapter 29, we'll just skim over these things. He comes to the well, and verse 9, while he yet spake, Rachel came to her father with her father's sheep, for she kept them. And it came to pass, when Jacob saw Rachel, the daughter of Laban, his mother's brother, and the sheep of Laban, his mother's brother, Jacob went near and rolled the stone from the well's mouth, and watered the flock for Laban, his mother's brother. Now, he didn't know who he was watering the flock for. He just saw this woman, and she came later, because she was the shepherdess. Everybody else, all the other flocks came with men. They had to move this rock and uncover the well to water the sheep. She came later because the men didn't like her coming there. She was a woman out of her pew. So when she shows up, the well is now closed up again. The men are gone. So Jacob opens the mouth of the well so she can water her sheep. And he kissed Rachel and lifted up his voice and wept. I mean, he recognized that she had to have been the kin. And Jacob told Rachel that he was her father's brother, and that he was Rebekah's son, and she ran and told her father. She leaves the sheep and off she goes. There's Jacob. Okay, I'll watch the sheep while you're gone. It came to pass when Laban heard the tidings of Jacob, his sister's son. I don't know why they have to keep telling you this. He ran to meet him and embraced him and kissed him and brought him to the house, and he told Laban all these things. So now Laban says, oh, goody, I got somebody to work for me. So he immediately begins to scheme, and Jacob, of course, asks for her hand, and he talks to the parents, and they say, well, okay, if she wants to go, that's fine with us. So then he tricks her. Verse 18. And Jacob loved Rachel and said, I will serve these 7 years for Rachel, your younger daughter. And Laban said, oh yeah, it's better that I give her to you than that I should give her to another man. Just stay with me a while. So Jacob served his 7 years for Rachel. So he had to work before he got to the marriage ceremony. He worked first. So he was there 7 years working.
He clearly said he would work for Rachel.
Yeah, he said that, I'm going to work for Rachel. And Laban said, yeah, sure. So he works 7 years before he gets a wife. Jacob served his 7 years for Rachel, and they seemed unto him but a few days for the love he had for her. Of course, he's around her. He can talk to her and be friends with her, but, sees her every day. I'm sure she kept on taking care of the sheep. So Jacob said unto Laban, give me now my wife, for my days are fulfilled, that I may go in unto her. And Laban gathered together all the men of the place, and he made a feast. This is a wedding feast. And it came to pass in the evening that he took Laban his daughter and brought her unto him, and he went in unto her. And Laban gave unto his daughter Leah Zilpah his maid for a handmaid. Well, she didn't go in the tent with him at the time. That's just an offhand statement in the middle of this discussion. And it came to pass that in the morning, behold, it was Leah. And he went to Laban, and he said, what have you done to me? I served you for Rachel. Now you beguiled me, you tricked me, and you gave me Leah. And Laban says, well, it's not done in our country for us to give the younger daughter away before we give the older daughter. So Laban says, fulfill her week, and by fulfilling the week, that means that he has to get her pregnant. He stays with her for 1 week, because when you got married at the time that you were going to conceive anyway. So he says, you stay with her for a week, make sure she's pregnant, then I'll let you have Rachel. He figured that if he got Leah pregnant, then maybe he could forget Rachel. Well, he never did forget Rachel. So Laban gave Rachel his daughter Bilhah as a handmaid. So he went in unto Rachel, and he loved Rachel more than Leah, and he always did, and said that, and Leah knew it. So he served him 7 more years. So now he's been 14 years there. Well, during those 14 years, Leah conceived that night of the wedding, and she named him Reuben. Then she quickly had 4, but like my time frame, I tell you, okay, so the night she gets married, she conceives Reuben. Then 2 years later, at least 2 years, maybe 3, because they weaned him between 2 and 3 years of age. Then she got pregnant and had Simeon. And then he's got Levi, and then Judah. So Judah is 4. So if you got 2 years between, you get to Reuben being 6 years old by the time Judah is born, right?
Or more, yeah.
Or more, right?
So there's only 7 years before he gets Rachel.
Do what?
How many children did,
Well, yeah, they didn't all have to be born before he got Rachel, though.
No, they were born during the time. Yeah. During while he was, he got
While he
Rachel
was
right
working.
away, but he had to work 7. So he worked 7 years for Rachel. Then he was given Rachel and had to work 7 more years. So he had Rachel and Leah while he was working off his time.
oh, I thought he had to wait 7 more years.
No, he gave it to Jacob right away.
Keep him from leaving and killing him and
Whatever.
doing things. Dishonest.
So you got 6 years here. So you need to get to chapter 30, and it says Rachel saw that she bare Jacob no children. So she's now unhappy. We've got 4 kids out of my sister. It's been 6 years now, and I haven't had any children at all. What's the problem? And it's just amazing that these women that figure into the lineage of Jesus This is the third one now that's barren. So Rachel hands off her concubine, her maid, to be a concubine. This is how Jacob gets 4 wives. So Rachel said, Rachel goes to Jacob and said, give me some children or else I die. I mean, she's mad. 6 years now and I've not gotten pregnant. What's the problem here? So Jacob, verse 2, we're in chapter 30, verse 2, and Jacob says, why are you getting mad at me? It's not my fault. Am I in God's place that I've done all I can. I can't help it that you're not getting pregnant. I obviously can do the job because we've got 4 out of Leah. So, with problems with you. So she said, well, go take my maid Bilhah. So he did, and she got pregnant. So then Bilhah had...
That's the same story with
Abraham
Isaac.
and...
Yeah, Abraham and Sarah.
And Hagar.
And Hagar, yeah.
Yeah.
Have her on my knees kind of thing.
Yeah. Okay. So Bilhah then conceives 2 children, Dan and Naphtali. Then Leah says, whoa, I'm not having any more kids. What's the problem here? So she takes her handmaid, Zilpah, and gives her to Jacob. And Zilpah's maid has 2 more sons named Gad and Asher. So now he's got 4, 6, 8 kids, right?
Now Leah,
No, this is out of 3 women. He's got Leah,
That's
Leah's
right.
maid, Rachel's maid.
right.
So he's got 8 kids out of 3 women.
Yeah.
It's hard to take today's values about fidelity. Hard to take that out of the picture of here in this time we are populating the earth. So all of this swooping and swapping and giving in
Yeah,
babies is
yeah.
A-okay.
Well, I don't know about being A-okay.
It wasn't
It was-
A-okay. I mean, it caused a big issue.
Yeah, it was a big ruckus between them, and
Well, they're
Yeah.
human. They have feelings.
Well, I mean, nobody was happy. Nope. I mean, this was a real dysfunctional family, absolutely dysfunctional family. Nobody was happy.
That's one of the ways.
Leah and Rachel didn't like one another, were constantly battling back and forth. The 2 handmaids, I'm sure that when they got handed off to Jacob, it was like, okay, and like Hagar, look, see how wonderful I am? I'm giving my...
well, they were just doing their job, but then they got uppity, and yeah.
Yeah, so...
I just, you were talking about the royal family yesterday. We're looking at some pictures about what that deal over there with the queen. 75 years in the
Platinum Jubilee.
being queen, and just that whole family is dysfunctional, and nobody likes anybody. They don't like their job. They don't like living there. And what was his name? Harry and Meghan. They even gave up their family
They gave it the title.
titles and said, "Well, we're going to America." So.
Okay, so they show up for this big deal over there in the church. They put them on the second row.
Yeah, they didn't put them on front.
And they
row.
made a big deal out of it. You could see, they came in by themselves, holding their little hands as they walked down the aisle. Okay, so when they get down to the front where they think they're going to sit,
Who
They got-
was it that got put in the second row?
Harry and Meghan.
Harry and Meghan.
Oh.
So the real family got put on the front row. But because Harry and Meghan disavowed their connection, didn't want to have anything to do with the royal family, and ran off to America.
That's right, and it's wrong.
Yeah.
So how do you...
Well, I mean, they absolutely insulted the royal family and the queen when they did this tell-all with Oprah.
That was Megan.
Yeah.
That was Meghan.
Yeah, oh, they mistreated me. My sister-in-law was so mean to me, made me cry.
And they pouted. And
Yeah.
just imagine this family here. You've got 3 wives, 8 kids from 3 different women.
You got 4 wives.
Or 4 wives, yeah, but the one hadn't had any kids yet. So, I mean,
Americans.
yeah, and the one that he really loved hadn't had any kids yet.
And he's doing all he can, but not his fault. So anyway, so Leah goes back to having kids.
That'd be much nicer.
Oh, yeah.
Pretty sure.
So here again, I mean, God would have blessed him just as much, maybe better, if he had just kept Leah. He could have still had 12 kids, right?
Yeah.
If God said, I'm going to give you a family that outnumbers whatever, Leah would have produced a big enough family for him to have that.
Yeah.
There's no such thing. I mean, I don't know what the connection was, why you have to have 12. But if you want to play numerology, you say, well, 12 times 12 is 144,000, or, you know, I don't know, people play those kind of games. But God didn't say that he had to have 12 kids, 12 sons. And he obviously had one daughter, Dinah, and may have had others. She just mentions Dinah. But anyway, so he ends up with 12 sons and a daughter named Dinah. So then he tells, this gets into about 20 years that he's been there. And no, he's been there longer than that. Because he worked 7 years for Leah.
Yeah, he worked 14 years for the 2 girls. And,
Oh, no, but he worked 7 years before he married Leah.
yeah.
So he was there 7 years, and then had Leah.
Yeah.
And then by the time you get the ages of the sons in here, that's 20 more years. So he's 27 years.
Yeah.
Okay, that adds up a little more time
Yeah,
on
you get it figured out.
Isaac's age. All right, so anyway, down to 25, chapter 30, 25. And it came to pass when Rachel had borne Joseph, and Jacob said unto Laban, Send me away, that I may go to mine own place and to my own country. Give me my wives and my children, for whom I have served thee, and let me go, for thou knowest my service which I have done to thee. So he's saying, yeah, I've been working for you, you haven't done anything for me yet. Laban said, Oh, I pray thee, if I found favor in thine eyes, tarry, for I have learned by experience that the Lord hath blessed me for thy sake. And he said, Appoint me thy wages, and I will give it. So Jacob said, he said unto him, Thou knowest that I have served thee, and how thy cattle was with thee. For it was little which thou hadst when I came, and now it is increased into a multitude, and the Lord hath blessed me since my coming. And now when shall I provide for my own house also? So he said, I've increased your house. How am I going to get anything for my own inheritance here? And he said, I will give, what will I give thee? And Jacob said, Thou shalt not give me anything. If thou wilt do this thing for me, I will feed and keep your flock. And I will pass through all your flock today, remove from thence all the speckled and spotted cattle, and all the brown cattle among the sheep, and the spotted and the speckled among the goats, and of such will be my hire. So he's already figured out by watching that if a speckled sheep gets with a white sheep, speckled lambs are born. He's figured this out. It has nothing to do with the willow branches, or whatever it is, that sticks in the ground. So he sees how prolifically these spotted and speckles are coming out. So he's got this figured out. So he said, if you don't want those, I'll go through today and I'll put all those out on the side. So we'll start fresh. These are all mine. Those are all yours. And we're going to see what we get out of this. And then I take all the ones that are spotted and speckled. So he's got this side put aside already. So he's got a group to begin with.
Laban taught him how to be the
Laban didn't teach him anything. He learned this on his own.
Well, how to be a chief.
Oh, yeah. Okay. Yep. Okay. So, so shall my righteousness answer for me in the time to come, and then when it shall come for my hire before thy face, everyone that is not speckled and spotted among the goats and among the sheep shall be counted for you. So he's being generous. All of them that are going to be white are going to be yours. Okay? So Laban says, okay, we can do this. So he went a distance. Verse 36 says he went 3 days' distance from where Laban was. So there wouldn't be any swapping back and forth. So he went 3 days' distance with the spotted animals that he'd already pulled out.
Oh, he put up a weir. That's what that is. It's nothing special about the poplar and whatnot. He put up like a head gate. I mean, it wasn't a head gate, but that's what, something where you funnel the cattle in.
Yes, and they stood there to drink. And
Down to the water, yeah.
Then they got bread.
And the white ones came in to drink, and he put his speckled bucks in there with them.
Yeah.
Yeah, he was no fool.
No, he knew what he was doing.
Yeah, get them in here, and we'll make some speckled and spotted sheep.
But it didn't have anything to do with the rods.
No, but
it's that he had noticed the genetics of this thing.
Yeah, but no, just the way it's written there. You wonder.
Laban didn't know anything about it.
I hadn't paid any attention, I guess, or something. I don't know. But Jacob, in verse 37, took him rods of green poplar and the hazel and chestnut tree, and piled white strakes in them, and made the white appear, which was in the rods. So he made a fence kind of thing, and put the white sheep in there. Or that's where the white sheep came to drink. And he set the rods, which he had piled before the flocks, in the gutters in the watering troughs, and when the flocks came in to drink, they should conceive when they came to drink. So it was just, yeah, it was a weir where he funneled the sheep in, and the white ones came in, and of course they got bread. And
With spotted bucks.
spotted bucks, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So Jacob then separated out the lambs and set the faces of the flocks toward the ring straight and all the brown in the flocks. And so he had figured out just from watching his animals what happened, what came out when the two animals got together, a bucket and a doe. Okay, they get together, and I've got a spotted buck. I'm going to get spotted kids out of this. So it came to pass that whensoever the stronger cattle did conceive, that Jacob laid the rods before the eyes of the cattle in the gutters, that they might conceive among the rods. But when the cattle were feeble, he didn't want them. See, so he didn't turn a buck in on those.
Careful breeder, yeah.
Yeah, he knew what he was doing. So the man increased exceedingly and had much cattle and men servants and maidservants and camels and donkeys. So after he said that he'd been there for a while, he had to have been there longer to get all his breeding done, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so then he goes to Laban and he says, okay, I've been here 20 years with you, and I want to leave. And he tells, where do I want to start over here? Oh, we just do 31, first one. And he heard the words of Laban's son, saying, Jacob hath taken away all that is our father's, and of that which is our father's hath he taken away for all his glory. So Laban's sons recognize that what Jacob's doing. I mean, they see all this big increase on Jacob's side. They don't see much going on for the father's side. His flock is diminishing. They're not sure how, but it's diminishing, while Jacob's flock is just getting bigger and bigger. So they recognize this, and they say, okay, he's stealing our inheritance. So Jacob beheld the countenance of Laban, and behold, it was not toward him as before. It never was very good, but now Laban sees, okay, I've been tricked. So the Lord said unto Jacob, return unto the land of thy fathers and into thy kindred, and I will be with thee. And Jacob sent and called Rachel and Leah to the field unto his flock. So he had to do this in secret. He said, I see your father's countenance is not as it was toward me as before, but the God of my father has been with me. Ye know that with all my power I have served your father. Your father has deceived me, changed my wages 10 times, and God has suffered him not to hurt me. If he said thus, the speckled shall be thy wages, then all the cattle here are speckled. And if he said thus, the ringstrakes shall be thy hire, then bear all the cattle ringstrakes. So he's saying, whatever Laban did to try to change what I was going to get out of this, I was blessed anyway. So it came to pass at the time that the cattle conceived that I lifted up mine eyes and saw a dream, and beheld the rams which leaped upon the cattle were ringstraked and speckled and grizzled. And the angel of God spake unto me in a dream, saying, Jacob. And I said, Here am I. And he said, Lift up now thine eyes, and see all the rams which leap upon the cattle are ringstraked and speckled and grizzled, for I have seen all that Laban doeth unto thee. And the God of Bethel, where the ladder was let down, where you anointed the pillar, and where you vowed a vow unto me, now arise, get thee out of this land, and return to the land of thy kindred. And Rachel and Leah answered and said, Is there yet any portion of inheritance here for our father's house? I mean, they know they're not appreciated by their dad. Why should we stay, they say. I mean, they're in essence saying, we'll go with you. There's nothing here for us. Don't leave us. Verse 15, For we are not counted unto him strangers, for he has sold us and hath quite devoured also our money. So they recognize that Laban is not very sound financially. And they look upon the marriage as a sale. And that's what they said. They sold us to you. You had to work to get us. They both recognize that. So they said, how much does my father care about me? He didn't try to find me a decent husband. We were sold to you. So, verse 16, for all the riches which God has taken from our father, that is now yours. So they recognize that God was shifting things from Laban to Jacob. So now then, whatsoever God has said unto thee, do. So they are going to follow the word of God. So Jacob rose up and set his sons and his wives on camels. He's leaving in secret. And he carried all of his cattle and all of his goods which he had gotten, and the cattle of his getting which he had gotten, and Paddan Aram to go to Isaac his father in the land of Canaan. And Laban went to shear his sheep, and Rachel had stolen the images that were her father's. So Laban's off somewhere else shearing the white sheep that belonged to him, while Jacob, the 2 wives and 2 concubines and all the kids sneak off in the other direction. Why did Rachel take the images? And what does the images, belonging to Laban mean?
What he believed as holy.
Do what?
I guess that was his God.
Yeah,
I don't know.
he was a false,
Followers,
false god. So was Laban a follower of the one true God?
No, he was family, but he wasn't following God.
He knew who God was?
Sure,
Because when he spoke about God's with you and God does this and that and the other, he knew who God was.
sure.
So,
Or else he's just being conniving because he believed that Jacob believed in a God, so he called. I mean, it could be a pretty deceiving.
yeah. I mean, if he's this deceptive with the way he treats Jacob and Leah and Rachel, he's not a God-fearing guy anyway, right? So why does Rachel go and get the images? She goes into his tent as they're leaving town and steals his idols.
Either she believed in him also, or else she just wanted to hurt her dad.
Did she worship the idols?
That's a good question. I don't know. I was wondering about that.
Because when you get on over here, just as they're getting ready to go into the territory where his father lived, he said, you got to give up all your idols and we're going to bury him over there. So Jacob knew that they had run off with these things.
Yeah.
So why did he let them take them?
They didn't make Laban feel unempowered. He doesn't have his gods in his presence or whatever.
That's a good point.
Yeah.
Here's speculation more.
Yeah,
Well,
that's
I
a
like
good
that,
point.
though.
Yeah,
That's- yeah.
good point. Okay, so Jacob stole away unawares. And again, Laban's called the Syrian. He was called a Syrian to begin with, so now he's identified again as a Syrian. And he fled with all he had, and he rose up and he passed over the river, and he set his face toward Mount Gilead. And Laban comes back or gets word that Jacob is taken off with everything. Somebody comes back out there where he's shearing his sheep. And he runs and he finds Jacob. He overruns him in verse 25. Laban took Jacob, and Jacob had pitched his tent in the mount, and Laban with the brethren pitched the tent in the Mount Gilead. So Laban said so now it's like you got 2 armies. You got Jacob on this side, Laban on this side. They both had their men with them. So it's the same situation that when they had war, they pitched on the hilltops, and they fought in the valleys. So this is the same situation you see here. So Laban comes up to him and says, why did you flee away from me, this is verse 27, and steal away from me, and did not tell me that I might send thee away with mirth and with songs and with tabret and with harp? All he wanted him to do by showing his, pitching his party was make him stay there even longer.
Yeah.
So by pitching a party, he gets a little more work out of him. Maybe he can trick him, maybe he can steal from him, maybe whatever. That's the only reason he wanted him to stay around. And you have not suffered me to kiss my sons and my daughters. Now, you've done foolishly here. But the daughters already said he didn't care anything about us.
Yeah.
So now he's playing up that game of, I do care about them, and you didn't let me kiss them goodbye. So, verse 29, it is in the power of my hand to do you hurt. Yes, because he brought all his herdmen with him. He's got an army there that he could attack Jacob with just all Jacob has got is a few servants of his and the children and his wives. So he doesn't have an army with him. So yeah, if Laban wanted to attack him, he could. He could do him hurt if he wanted to. So verse 30, and now, though thou wouldst needs be gone, because you are sore longed after your father's house, yet wherefore hast thou stolen my gods? And Jacob says, do what? Laban had managed to stop by the tent on the way here, and he's found out that his gods are gone. So Jacob didn't know that Rachel had stolen them. So Jacob said unto Laban, because I was afraid, for I said, peradventure that you would take by force your daughters from me. With whomsoever thou findest the gods, let him not live. Before our brethren could discern thou what is thine with me, and take it to thee. Well, what he's saying is, whatever is yours, it's a part among my stuff, you take it back. I don't want it. So Jacob didn't know that Rachel had stolen them. And Laban went into Jacob's tent, and he went into Leah's tent, and he went into the maid's tent, and he went into whatever it is. But when he gets to Rachel's tent, Rachel pretends to be unclean, and she's sitting on the camel's saddle that she'd hidden these images under. So she tells her dad, oh no, you can't touch me, and you can't touch anything that I sit on. So Laban walked off and left her. So she's tricking, right? Not only is she a thief, but she can lie to her father like this. Okay.
She worship the idols without any kind of.
Maybe they were pretty, and she thought she wanted to take them with her. Obviously made out of some kind of metal.
Maybe she was mad at her dad and took them because they.
Yeah. So, down to verse, Laban comes and says, I can't find you. I know you got them. So Jacob gets mad. He says, why are you mad at me? What is my trespass? What is my sin? Verse 36. What have I done that you come running after me? You found nothing here that belongs to you. Verse 37. You searched all my stuff, and you found, and thou found all thy household stuff. Set it there before my brethren, so that we can judge between both of us. Well, then he goes on. He says, 20 years I've been with you. Your ewes and your she-goats had not cast their young. The rams of the flock have I not eaten. I mean, he says, I didn't take anything from you, nothing from you, for 20 years. Which of your animals were torn by beasts? I took the loss on that. Verse 40, thus I was in the day that the drought consumed me, and the frost by night, and sleep departed from me, saying, all these 20 years, I have been out there suffering in the field, day and night, taking care of your flocks, making sure that you didn't lose anything. Verse 41, thus I had been with thee 20 years in thy house. I served 14 years for your 2 daughters, and 6 for your cattle, and thou hast changed my wages 10 times. Except the God of my father, the God of Abraham, and the fear of Isaac had been with me, surely thou had sent me away now empty. So evidently Jacob is giving credit to Laban that he worships the one true God, right? But God has seen my affliction and the labor of my hands, and has rebuked you yesterday, because Laban had a dream. And Laban answered and said unto Jacob, these daughters are my daughters, and these children are my children, these cattle are my cattle, and all that thou seest is mine. He's at this point, he's still saying everything that is out there belongs to me, doesn't belong to you. He does not recognize that Jacob has worked for anything. If Jacob had not sneaked off in the night like he did, Laban would have made sure he didn't leave with anything.
Yeah.
So verse 44, now therefore let us make a covenant, you and me, and let it be a witness between you and me. And this is another form of covenant. It is similar to the parity covenant that we've already looked at, because they set up pillars, and they put a heap of rocks, and it's a different kind of parity covenant, but it's essentially the same thing. And they sit down and they have the meal, which is part of the parity covenant. And verse 54, and Jacob offered the sacrifice upon the mountain, and called his brethren, and they did eat bread, and they did eat and bread, and tarried all night in the mount. Early in the morning Laban rose up, kissed his sons and his daughters, and blessed them, and Laban departed and returned unto his place. And then Jacob goes on, headed home. Well, as he gets close to where Jacob is, he gets scared of Esau. To where Esau, he gets scared of Esau. And finds out that Esau is headed toward him with 400 men. Well, if he left 20 years before, and his brother was mad at him, and now his brother's coming towards him with 400 men, wouldn't you think he's going to get his head chopped off? But what did God promise him? That he was going to protect him. 20 years before, God said, I'm going to be with you, I'm going to take care of you. So was there any reason for him to be upset when his brother's coming with 400 men?
No, not really, if he believed what God had done for him and would do for him.
And if he had looked back over the past 20 years and saw how rich he was now, he went down there with nothing. He didn't even have the price, the bride price to get a wife. He had nothing when he came to Laban.
We don't think. None of us do.
Okay, so now,
You see 400 men and your brother coming, you're thinking, oh, he's still mad.
yeah, absolutely he did. But if he believed God, he would have gone out there and stood in front of him. Instead, what he did was divide up his family, and he sent people ahead of him. He sent livestock ahead of him, trying to soften his brother's heart towards him. And he thought, well, I'll send, this concubine and her kids, and if he kills them, that's just a few. Okay, and then I'll send the next concubine and a few of the kids, and and some animals, and if he kills them, well, I still got. And the last one, he protected Rachel because that's the one he really loved.
Mhm.
So while he's doing all this, he's left alone. He sent his families and flocks ahead of time. Verse 24. And Jacob was left alone, and there wrestled with a man with him until the breaking of the day. And when he saw that he prevailed not against him, he, the angel, or the man, it doesn't call him an angel, but it's a man, touched him in the hollow of his thigh, at the just over the greater trochanter there. And it was out of joint. And he wrestled with him. And he said, let me go. The man said, let me go, for the day breaks. And he said, I will not let you go except you bless me. And he said unto him, what is your name? And he said, Jacob. And he said, your name shall be no more called Jacob, but Israel. Israel means a prince with God. That's the definition of the name. For as a prince thou hast power with God, and with men thou hast prevailed. And Jacob said, tell me, what's your name? You asked me mine, what's yours? And he said, why do you ask my name? So he would not tell him his name, and he blessed him. So Jacob called the name of that place Peniel, for I have seen God face to face, and my life was preserved. So this is Christ pre-incarnate again. Just like Christ pre-incarnate appeared to Abraham, along with those angels, and walked and talked with Abraham. This is God, Christ pre-incarnate, come back again.
But don't you think as me, I wrestle with God a lot.
Yeah.
I want my way, and he wants his way.
He knows what's best for you.
I know. But we do wrestle with God.
So why did he get in this struggle? He's by himself. He's all alone. And all of a sudden he's fighting. Say what?
If he suddenly was aware that somebody was in proximity to him, why wouldn't he assume it's an enemy?
Sure.
Yeah, initially. And then somehow he came to his senses and said, no, this is not just any enemy.
When he had his hip put out of joint.
Yeah.
So did Jesus come, or Christ come to fight with him?
Put some sense in him. Bless him.
Did Christ appear to Jacob to fight with him?
No, I don't believe he did.
No, it was Jacob that started fighting, I'm sure, defending himself. I just wonder if it wasn't a battle of conscience as much as a physical. Yeah, it was physical. Can't deny that. But it was his conscience that God was trying to say, Jacob, it's time for you to straighten up.
Maybe, but I think it was a physical thing for him to show
Oh, yeah, it
how
was,
weak he
absolutely.
was.
Yeah.
Didn't recognize it when it was spoken.
Well, and to show him
His
how weak.
means of doing stuff is
Show him that he just couldn't do it.
Yeah, to show him how weak he was, and that's what Paul says there in Romans 5. That when we were yet without strength, God sent his Son.
Okay, but let's turn the story a different direction.
Okay.
Jacob is scared. He
Mm-hmm.
knows that his brother is out there, has 500 men ready to kill him and take everything that he's got. And this man shows up at his side. He is scared and begins to fight. He doesn't ask any questions. He just jumps up and starts fighting. A rash response, right? He should have said, "Who are you? What's your name?" to begin with, right? Instead of asking it at the end. So to me, I think Christ showed up to sit down beside him and talk to him,
Yeah.
to encourage him.
Yeah.
It's going to be okay, Jacob. Get up in the morning, go meet your brother. It's going to be okay. I am going to be with you.
Just like
Instead, Jacob fought. In his own strength, he tried to take care of the problem. Didn't work. So I think that Jesus came to him to be his friend and his encourager.
Yeah.
So how many times does God come to us to be an encourager and to help us get through the situation, and we fight? Okay, so right here you see that that's not the way to do things, right? And Jacob ended up broken. You know, his hip was displaced because he fought. So something happened to him that should never have happened to him. He suffered the rest of his life with this. He should never have to do that if he had only recognized that God was there to begin with. So do we end up suffering things that we bring upon ourselves that God never would have wanted us to have to go through because we fight with God instead of letting him lead us? Okay.
I believe that sometimes, we have faith.
Yeah?
Sometimes we don't let God do work because we're like, now, Lord, now. Next week, not wait until your time. But if we wait on God, he'll do it.
There's a fine line waiting on God and thinking that you need to do something because you're supposed to go and do it.
Yeah, it's hard to
That
discern
fine
that
line
sometimes.
is not a clear line.
No, it isn't. And we gotta have faith that God will do it. Because we get in a hurry doesn't mean a hill of beans. God does it in his time, but we want it in our time.
Yeah, but the issue here is fear.
Fear.
He should never have been afraid. God had promised him 20 years before that everything was going to be okay. He forgot that. He had had to struggle to take care of himself and to get everything that he had. He had had to struggle and fight against Laban, against odds, against weather, against whatever. 20 years he's been fighting. That's his attitude. So he was not prepared because he had struggled and struggled for 20 years. He was not prepared to see that it was God that was right there beside him.
Perhaps the promise would have been included, you will be okay forever.
Yeah.
So that he could have retained that forever.
Maybe he didn't see all the blessings that's coming from God. I did this. I figured out how to breed my animals. I did, he didn't see that the blessing came from God.
Yeah.
Maybe he, by and large recognized that it was from God, but still, I've got my struggle over here, and I was the one that figured out this ring strike, and there was an element of me in this. So at this point, he has to get rid of the me.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
His fight, I guess you could say, really wasn't with the angel or with Jesus. It was himself.
Yes, he had to struggle with himself to get self out of the way. He had to recognize that he was powerless. The blessings did not come from him, the work that he did. The blessings came from God. Okay, I'll turn it over to Leslie.